sea is never still. It pounds on the shore, restless as a young hart hunting. The sea speaks, and only the stormy hearts know what it says. It is the face of a rough mother speaking. The sea is young. One storm cleans all the hoar and loosens the age of it. I hear it laughing, reckless. They love the sea, men who ride on it, and know they will die under the salt of it. Let only the young come, says the sea. Let them kiss my face and hear me. I am the last word, and I tell where storms and stars come from. We continue our journey through the Gospel of Mark. In fact, the passage at the end of chapter 4 follows on the passage from last week. Remember those parables about the reign of God, the reign of heaven? We talked about whether or not they called us to look at the world in a new way, with believing eyes, trusting eyes in God, rather than trusting eyes on our own selves, trying to control destiny. We talked about whether or not actions on our part to grasp hold of justice were actions that were working towards God's end or towards our own end. We didn't find a simple line between the two. Would you listen for a word from God as the Spirit brings it to you? So with many such parables, Jesus spoke the word to them as they were able to hear it. He didn't speak to them except in parables, but he explained everything in private to his disciples. And on that day, when the evening had come, Jesus said to the disciples, "Let us go across to the other side." And leaving the crowd behind, they took him with them in the boat, just as he was. Other boats were with him, but a great windstorm arose and the waves beat into the boat so that the boat was already being swamped. But he was in the stern, asleep on a cushion. And they woke him up and said to him, "Teacher, don't you care if we're perishing?" Jesus woke up. He rebuked the wind and said to the sea, "Silent, be still." Then the wind ceased, and there was a dead calm. Jesus said to the disciples, "Why are you afraid? Have you still no trust?" And they were filled with great awe, saying to one another, "Who is this, that even the wind and the sea obey him?" Who indeed? Should give a warning with this sermon, pastor working out the existential implications of his vocation. I have a doctor who treats me for pain. And he gave me that drawing the other day. It's from a friend of his. There's actually a really sweet and amazing story that goes with it. A woman named Marla, when she was a little girl, about 7 years old, got encephalitis. Her brother had died a couple of years before, and she was in a coma. She was right on the edge. They called for the last rites. But her mother refused to let her go and sat there and just stroked her hand and said, "I will not lose another child. I will not lose another child." And slowly but surely, Marla came out of the coma. But that wasn't even the beginning of it, because she came out almost vegetable-like. But her mother was absolutely committed to seeing her thrive. She had tremendous courage. And 40 years later, she's an osteopath, medical doctor, who deals with pain. Now, the interesting thing about this picture is that she carried the memory of the pain of that coma for 30 years. She had a headache for 30 years after she came out, a driving headache she couldn't get rid of. Until at one point she went to some massage therapy, kind of a cranial sacral sort of therapy, what we consider alternative that isn't alternative at all. And in the midst of a treatment, it was actually in sort of a school, she felt the most unbelievable searing pain. It racked her entire body. It scared her. It scared the people giving her the therapy. They stopped and they say, "Should we continue?" And she said, "Yes, go ahead." Her entire body racked. Went into a position that doctors tell me is the position that a neurological patient goes into right at the point of death. And when it was over, no headache. And they asked her to draw a picture of the experience, what was happening at that moment, and this is what she drew. It's incredible. Can you imagine that much of yourself absorbed in pain? Now, the curious thing to me about this picture is that there's no head. No head. That little blue square you see, that's just the stationery from the hotel where this thing was taking place. No head. Except for this little spot, if I can get it. Yeah, right up there. See up there? That's right where the amygdala should be. The amygdala being that part of our brain that holds the rawest emotion, the fight, the flight. That thing that allows us to survive in the most terrifying moments of life. And between it and the hippocampus, it's sort of cousin that holds the memories of those traumas. It allows us to move from the edge of pain to the edge of life. It goes back and forth. It's almost like pain is the last thing that she's able to hold on to before there's death. It's terrifying, isn't it? Pain is terrifying. We wonder if it'll ever go away. How many of you have given birth? How many of you have had a kidney stone? Will it ever go away? Ear infections? You know, the pain is terrifying. And the thing is, it's not only about physical pain that's terrifying. Emotional pain is terrifying too. And the reality is, it's all wrapped up in the same brain chemistry. Because you can release some forms of chronic physical pain if you're able to release the memories of trauma that have gone before it. Hence this woman's ability to lose that headache after all those many years. It's terrifying. So it's not only that physical pain, but it's emotional too. It's that moment early in your life when somebody said you're a lousy artist or what a terrible voice. So somehow you're shut down, you're not able to really live out the heart of who you are. It's that moment of deep traumatic loss. Maybe it's something forgotten by everybody else you know. Maybe it was a friend that just moved away all of a sudden and you didn't know why. The trauma of mostly men who go to war, the trauma of all people who live in the midst of a war zone. It's terrifying, the emotional pain. Entire systems, entire nations get caught up in it. Consider the memory that's held collectively throughout the Middle East. For thousands of years, the pain and the fear of war has defined the region, and they live with the memory. Whether or not it's defined by that picture, they live with the memory like that. Sometimes I think the entire globe is living right on an edge like that as our ecosystem is being rocked to its core. As though we're a little spot, on this speck in the midst of the universe, like we're in one of those boats, like the disciples and Jesus were. As the chaos, the wind and the waves just splash all around us. How is it that we are to face and to unfold something beautiful in those moments of deep pain? In the moments when you hurt deep inside, when you're so overwhelmed by it that your body and your heart are looking to you like that. Where do we go at that moment? Do we scream at the top of our lungs, the primal scream? I hear there's a moment like that in Robert Redford's new movie. A primal scream as he realizes he's moving towards the end. In the movie Gravity, there was a temper tantrum as Sandra Bullock realizes she may not make it home. Do we just do a primal scream, or do we scream at Jesus and say, "What's the matter with you? Can't you wake up and fix this?" Do we have to be Jesus who can control our destiny in order to make it through moments like that? Well, that's not what this passage of Scripture is about. I don't believe it. This is a myth. This is a story. And it's a story about going from one side to the other side. He's just got through talking to the disciples about what it's like to live in a world with the reign of God surrounding you. In a world where you do not live out of the fear and the pain that's up there, but instead where you live out of that innate trust that God will unfold something beautiful from what it is horrible that surrounded you. Silence, be still. It's their hearts he silenced in the midst of that storm, moving from one side to the other, like that moment in my life when I realized there was no magic God, terrified, what's next? That moment in your life when you realize what we can hear, taste, touch, see, and smell isn't everything in the universe. When we realize we've been running with too much gas of our own and not being responsible to anything other than ourselves during moments of crisis. From one side to the other, you can bet that the storms will start to fly inside. You can bet that the storms were flying inside those disciples because they were moving into the place where they could recognize the reign of God as a reign that required you to trust in the face of all that. And Jesus says, "Be still, where's your faith?" Why did it work? See this right in here? I'll get it right there. Look at that clear spot. Right in the center of who she is. As though there is some sort of light, some sort of strength right in the center of who we are that can connect to the presence of God, the God that unfolds creation before our eyes. As I like to say, the God that unfolded creation from the Big Bang to Shakespeare. It's right in the center of who he is, who she is, in the center of who we are too. I actually didn't realize that until this morning when I preached at 8:30. One of the members of our church who was in that service had encephalitis when she was a little girl. She remembered the pain, and she said it was like that, and there was that something right in the middle of who she was that allowed her to carry on in the midst of it. To get to that place where she could unfold what was beautiful and what was next. That's what Jesus was calling them to, moving from one side to the other, relying on what's in the center and not the storm that flies all about us, the pain that takes us down. Who was Jesus? Was he a magician? No. He's the one that calls us to rely on the God that lives in the center of who we are, who in fact expresses the center of who we are. Jesus is the one that calls us to that moment, wanted the reign of heaven to fill the earth. And he said, do you have faith? Do you have enough trust? You're about to meet the Roman powers. Do you have trust in that center? Will you have trust when you meet the powers of war? When you meet the crisis of injustice? When you meet the ecological crisis that is about to crack open the earth? Will you have trust? That's who Jesus is, the one that asks us to rely in that way. And it's not easy. And it takes incredible courage. But it's why I'm here. I am here with you because I believe, against all odds, that in the midst of the storm, in the midst of the pain, in the midst of the fear, there is that something in the center that the presence of God can make whole. It allows us to change. That's why I'm here. I believe that you and I can be a community that is formed around the God that lives in that center. And as we do, we will change the world around us. That's what we can do from this beautiful new space. We can't stop the horrors of the world from coming. It is the nature of creation that the horrors come, that the sea billows wail. But there is that something right inside that allows us to act with confidence that God's power to love will be God's power to see us to the next beautiful thing. Are you worried about the edge where you climb over into death? The God in the center of that will carry you to a new place. That's the promise that Jesus brings. It's the reign of heaven that he's called us to this whole time. But it takes courage. Courage like that little girl Marla had all those years ago, as she fought her way back from that. The sea is never still. It pounds on the shore, restless as a young hart hunting. The sea speaks, and only the stormy hearts know what it says. It is the face of a rough mother speaking. The sea is young, one storm cleans all the hoar and loosens the age of it. I hear it laughing, reckless. They love the sea, all you who ride on it, and know you will die under the salt of it. Let only the young come, says the sea. Let them kiss my face and hear me. I'm the last word. And I tell where storms and stars come from.
Take care of this house. Keep it from harm. If bandits break in, sound the alarm. Care for this house. Shine it by hand and keep it so clean the glow can be seen all over the land. Be careful at night. Check all the doors. If someone makes off with a dream, the dream will be yours. Take care of this house. Be always on call. For Check